Leela had always dreamed of this moment, imagining herself walking down the aisle, radiant in white, surrounded by the smiling faces of her friends, family, and neighbors, all sharing in her joy. The small town she had grown up in buzzed with excitement for her marriage, the kind that promised stability, admiration, and love. Every detail of the preparations, from the delicate lace she had helped choose for her dress to the fragrant bouquets arranged by her mother, felt like a reflection of the life she longed for. One filled with tenderness, laughter, and the warmth of a devoted partner. As she wandered through the familiar streets, hearing the soft murmur of congratulations and well wishes, a flutter of hope and anticipation stirred in her chest. She had worked tirelessly to support her family, and this union seemed to promise not only personal happiness but security for those she loved. Leela's imagination painted the life she thought awaited her. Mornings spent in quiet companionship, evenings by a crackling fire, shared dreams whispered in candlelight. Every compliment, every encouraging word, reinforced the illusion that her life was finally about to change for the better. She could feel herself glowing with pride and relief, the culmination of years of struggle and perseverance finally arriving as a golden opportunity for love and belonging. Yet beneath the surface of the town's festive cheer, subtle signs she failed to notice hinted at the truth. Furtive glances exchanged between strangers, whispered conversations that paused when she approached, a coldness in the man who was supposed to be her future husband masked by formal politeness. But Leela, so consumed by her anticipation and excitement, brushed aside any doubts, unwilling to let skepticism tarnish what she believed was a once-in-a-lifetime moment of joy. In her heart, she clung to the notion that love would be gentle and protective, that the life she had imagined since girlhood was finally within reach, and that the town's celebration reflected genuine happiness for her future. The warmth of hope wrapped around her like a comforting shawl, blind to the shadow of betrayal that lingered just beyond the laughter, the ribbons, and the music. In this fragile cocoon of expectation and dreams, Leela's story began, a story of innocence, aspiration, and a stark contrast between the life she imagined and the harsh reality that awaited her, setting the stage for the courage, resilience, and eventual love that would define her journey. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and golden, the sunlight streaming through the lace curtains of Leela's room, as if blessing the day. Yet beneath the bright promise of a new beginning lingered an uneasy tension she could not yet name. The townspeople had gathered in cheerful clusters outside the small chapel, their chatter and laughter creating a festive hum that wrapped around her like a warm cloak. But when a carriage appeared at the edge of the square, the festive air seemed to shift. It was not the groom who arrived, but a stranger, tall, impeccably dressed, and bearing an expression so cold and calculated that it sent a shiver down Leela's spine, though she tried to dismiss it. He introduced himself with precise politeness, claiming to represent her future husband, his voice smooth and measured, betraying nothing, yet carrying a subtle weight of authority that made the townspeople defer without question. Leela's heart fluttered nervously. This was the man who would usher her into the life she had dreamed of. Yet, something about his rigid posture and carefully neutral gaze set her on edge. She searched the crowd, hoping to glimpse the warm, familiar features of the man she had been promised, but instead found only the excited, oblivious faces of neighbors who seemed unaware of the tension she suddenly felt. Her mother whispered reassurances, and the wedding coordinator offered smiles that were meant to soothe, but all Leela could notice was the strange precision in the stranger's movements, the way he seemed to measure every gesture, as if nothing in this moment was left to chance. She tried to shake off the growing unease, telling herself it was simply nerves, that weddings were stressful, and that this man's professionalism was a sign of respect, not menace. Yet each step she took toward the chapel, guided by the stranger, amplified her sense of displacement. The world she had imagined warm, loving and safe now felt unnervingly fragile, like a delicate glass figurine teetering on the edge of a table. The shadows of doubt whispered at the edges of her consciousness, but the excitement and pressure of the day silenced them, leaving her clinging to hope as she crossed the threshold of what she believed was her new life. The stranger led her with unwavering control, each movement orchestrated, and Leela, swept up in the ceremony's momentum, could not yet see that this was not the wedding she had envisioned, but the beginning of a life dictated by the cold calculations of others. A life where love and choice were still far beyond her reach, and where the first seeds of courage she would need to survive were quietly being sown. As Leela approached the altar, a strange hush fell over the gathered townspeople, and she noticed the subtle shifts in the whispers around her, the quick exchanges of glances that faltered the moment she turned her head. Something in the air felt wrong, yet the excitement of the day pressed her forward, urging her to ignore the faint tremor of doubt curling in her stomach. The stranger who had escorted her now guided her with a precision that no longer felt polite or professional. It felt possessive, almost coldly strategic. As they moved, she overheard fragments of conversation between attendants and distant voices in the crowd. Words like transaction, price, and sold drifted through the air like sharp knives cutting through the festive veil she had believed in. Leela froze, the ornate lace of her gown suddenly heavy on her shoulders, her pulse hammering in her ears as the joyous music of the ceremony became distant and distorted, replaced by a ringing panic she could not yet fully understand. The truth landed with a jarring weight. She was not being married, not joining a life of love and security, but being sold to a man she did not know, a stranger who cared nothing for her happiness or dreams. Betrayal surged through her like wildfire, burning away the illusions she had clung to so tightly. The smiles, the flowers, the musical had been a facade, masking a cruel plan orchestrated by those she had trusted. Her knees trembled as she looked around, seeking even a single familiar face of understanding. But the town's collective cheerfulness seemed to blind them to the injustice unfolding, leaving her isolated in her sudden terror. The stranger's controlled gaze met hers, and in it there was no warmth, no glimmer of the partnership or affection she had imagined, only ownership, cold and unwavering. Leela's mind raced, trying to reconcile the life she had pictured with the harsh reality that now pressed against her like iron bars. Her chest tightened, thoughts spiraling between fear, confusion, and the sting of betrayal, yet somewhere deep within, a flicker of determination ignited. She could not, would not, accept this as her fate. The path before her, though shadowed and uncertain, was now a matter of survival, demanding courage and cunning she had never known she possessed. This moment, shocking and cruel, became the crucible that would forge her resilience, planting the first seeds of the strength, resourcefulness, and inner fire she would need to reclaim her life, navigate the dangers ahead, and eventually discover that even in the darkest deception, the human spirit and the possibility of love could endure. The realization that she had been sold ignited a fire within Leela that no fear could extinguish. With her heart pounding like a drum, she scanned her surroundings for any possible way out, her mind racing through every corner, every door, every shadowed hallway of the grand estate where she had been brought. The ornate decorations, once symbols of celebration and beauty, now felt like cages, gilded prisons designed to keep her trapped. She seized a moment when the stranger's attention faltered, ducking behind a heavy velvet curtain, her fingers trembling as she pushed it aside and slipped into the dimly lit corridor beyond. Every step she took was measured, cautious, as if the creak of a floorboard might betray her to those who sought to control her. Panic and adrenaline intertwined, sharpening her senses. The faint clatter of silverware from the dining hall, the hushed commands of the guards, the distant laughter of the oblivious townspeople still caught up in the illusion of a wedding, all of it underscored the danger she faced. Lila's thoughts raced. She had no plan, no ally, only the desperate need to reclaim her freedom. She tried doors along the corridor, only to find them locked or guarded. Each failed attempt escalating her fear but also hardening her resolve. Her pulse was a relentless drumbeat in her ears, and every shadow seemed alive with the threat of capture. Yet with every cautious step, she felt a quiet surge of empowerment. For the first time, she acted not as a passive participant in her fate, but as an active force shaping her destiny. She slipped through narrow passages, clinging to the hope that someone, anyone, might notice her plight and offer aid. But the estate was vast and silent, a labyrinth built to intimidate and ensnare. Exhausted and trembling, she pressed herself against the cold stone walls, listening intently for footsteps or voices, her mind already planning the next move. In the chaos of her flight, Leela discovered an unexpected clarity, a recognition of her own courage, resourcefulness, and refusal to be treated as property. Though fear was constant, it was no longer paralyzing. It had become a tool, a reminder of what she had to fight for: her life, her dignity, and the hope that somewhere beyond the estate walls lay a future of her own choosing. This desperate, dangerous escape attempt marked the beginning of her transformation, the moment when a frightened young woman first began to step fully into her own strength, setting the stage for the alliances, challenges, and discoveries that would soon define her journey. As Lila navigated the shadowed halls and hidden passages of the estate, her limbs aching and her breath shallow, she stumbled into a small, dimly lit storage room, startled to find a young man crouched among crates and barrels. His eyes widened in equal surprise, but instead of alarm or accusation, they held a flicker of recognition, a silent understanding of the peril she faced. His name was Elias, a worker at the estate who had long resented the cruel practice of buying and selling women, yet had lacked the courage to openly challenge it until now. Without a word, he offered her a quiet nod, guiding her further into the maze of corridors where the guards were unlikely to follow. Lila, exhausted and weary, felt a mix of relief and skepticism. She had no reason yet to trust anyone, yet something in Elias's calm, deliberate movements and the subtle way he avoided drawing attention suggested he genuinely wanted to help. As they navigated the estate together, he shared snippets of information, secret passages, times when the guards were inattentive, and routes that might lead her beyond the estate's boundaries. Each revelation was a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the oppressive darkness of her captivity. Despite the danger, Lila found herself drawn to Elias's quiet courage, the steady assurance in his voice, and the empathy in his gaze. She realized that he was not only an ally in the immediate struggle for her freedom but also someone who might understand the depth of her fear and the strength of her resolve. Alongside him, she discovered a new sense of agency. Her decisions mattered, her courage could shape outcomes, and she was no longer entirely at the mercy of others. In these fleeting moments of partnership, their relationship began to evolve, a subtle connection built on trust, mutual respect, and the shared recognition of injustice. Lila's heart, still raw from betrayal and fear, felt a cautious warmth at the presence of someone who saw her as more than property, who acknowledged her humanity even in the shadow of danger. Yet, even as they plotted her escape, the threat of discovery loomed like a constant storm cloud. Every step taken was fraught with peril, and one wrong move could undo their fragile progress. This unexpected alliance marked a turning point. For the first time, Lila was not alone, and the possibility of hope, protection, and even the spark of love began to take root, intertwining with her determination to reclaim her life, defy the forces that sought to control her, and confront the challenges that lay ahead with both courage and resilience. As days passed in hiding, Lila and Elias developed a rhythm, a quiet understanding born of necessity and danger, each learning to anticipate the other's thoughts and movements. The more time they spent together, the more Lila realized that Elias was not just a protector but a man of remarkable insight, patience, and compassion. Their whispered conversations in shadowed corners revealed fragments of their pasts. Lila shared her dreams of love and freedom, the life she had imagined before it was stolen from her, while Elias spoke cautiously of his own struggles, the small rebellions he had attempted within the estate and the longing he felt for a world where injustice did not rule. In these moments, their connection deepened, subtle touches lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary, shared glances that carried unspoken understanding, and the comfort of a steady presence amidst chaos. Lila found herself noticing details about him she had never expected to care about. The way his eyes softened when he offered reassurance, the quiet determination in his stance, and the rare fleeting smiles that hinted at a gentleness beneath his cautious exterior. She was acutely aware that feelings like these were dangerous, that attachment could compromise their safety, yet she could not suppress the warmth growing in her chest, nor the flutter of anticipation whenever their paths crossed in secrecy. Elias, too, felt the pull of something more than mere loyalty, though he restrained himself, aware of the peril surrounding them and the precarious position Lila was in. Yet even in the midst of fear, desperation, and the constant threat of discovery, their bond became a lifeline, a source of strength that bolstered their courage and sharpened their resolve. Each moment of shared laughter, careful planning, or simple human touch reminded them that even in the darkest circumstances, hope could exist and hearts could connect. The subtle tension of forbidden feelings added a layer of intensity to their alliance, an undercurrent of emotion that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lila began to understand that trust, once earned through shared danger and empathy, could blossom into something deeper, a connection that transcended fear. And Elias, silently admiring her bravery and resilience, recognized that his heart had become entwined with hers, creating a bond forged in adversity, danger, and mutual respect, a bond that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine, as the shadows of the estate and the cruel intentions of those who sought to control her loomed ever closer. The fragile safety Lila and Elias had carved out for themselves came crashing down one tense evening when the estate's owner, the man who had purchased her, discovered her absence and the subtle traces of their escape attempt. Lila had been cautiously moving through a rarely used corridor, hoping to test the limits of her freedom. When the distant clatter of hurried footsteps alerted her to the approaching danger, Elias grabbed her arm, pulling her into the shadows, their hearts pounding in unison as they listened to the heavy, authoritative steps of the buyer drawing nearer. The confrontation was inevitable, and its weight pressed down on them like a physical force. The man's cold, calculating eyes swept the hallways, searching for the girl he considered property. When he finally found them, his voice rang with controlled fury, demanding Leela be returned immediately, dismissing her pleas, her protests, and even Elias's defiant stance as inconsequential. But Elias, who had grown bold through the days of protecting her and witnessing her resilience, refused to yield, stepping forward to challenge the man's authority. A tense battle of words ensued, each sentence sharp, calculated, and loaded with the weight of moral righteousness and personal courage. Leela, though terrified, realized that she could not remain passive. The confrontation demanded she act, speak, and assert herself in ways she had never imagined. With a mix of cunning strategy, quick thinking, and the knowledge of the estate's hidden roots, they managed to outmaneuver the buyer, turning his own overconfidence into an opportunity for escape. Leela's fear transformed into determination, her voice carrying not just pleading or desperation but the firm assertion of her right to choose her own destiny. The confrontation became more than a mere struggle for physical freedom. It was a clash of values, courage, and resilience, a test of the strength they had cultivated together. The buyer, unprepared for the combination of Leela's newfound boldness and Elias's unwavering support, was forced to retreat, his control over the situation shattered. In the aftermath, as they caught their breath and assessed their narrow victory, Leela and Elias felt the bond between them solidify, tempered in the fire of shared danger. This moment, charged with fear, defiance, and the first real taste of triumph, marked the turning point in Leela's journey. She had faced the full force of oppression and survived not alone but with someone who had proven himself loyal, courageous, and unexpectedly essential to her heart, setting the stage for the final step toward freedom and the love that had grown amid peril. After the harrowing confrontation, Leela and Elias moved swiftly, every step fueled by the urgency of newfound freedom and the lingering adrenaline of narrowly escaping capture. The estate that had once seemed imposing and inescapable now lay behind them, a labyrinth of oppression and fear that they had conquered together, leaving only echoes of its darkness in their memories. As they emerged into the open countryside, the cool evening air filled Leela's lungs like a promise of life reclaimed, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hope without restraint. The town that had cheered her marriage now became a distant backdrop, irrelevant to the life she was choosing to embrace, a life defined not by the expectations or deceit of others, but by her own courage, decisions, and heart. Walking beside Elias, Leela felt a profound gratitude and admiration for the man who had risked everything to help her, who had seen her humanity when the world treated her as a commodity, and whose unwavering presence had given her the strength to confront fear and reclaim agency over her destiny. Along the winding path to freedom, their hands brushed, tentative at first, then entwined, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in the fires of danger, trust, and shared vulnerability. Love, once a distant dream in Leela's heart, had emerged as a living, breathing reality, unexpected, tender, and resilient, shaped by the trials they had endured together. Every glance, every whispered reassurance, carried the weight of shared experience and unspoken devotion, binding them in a way that transcended circumstance. By the time they reached the edge of the town where their journey had begun, the stars were emerging, casting a gentle light over a landscape now full of possibility. Leela realized that her story, which had begun with betrayal and fear, had transformed into one of empowerment, courage, and love that could endure even the darkest beginnings. Elias, seeing the determination and strength reflected in her eyes, felt a deep certainty that they had not only survived but had found in each other a rare and enduring partnership, one built on equality, respect, and profound emotional connection. Together, they stepped forward into a future they would shape side by side, free from the chains of deceit, and filled with the quiet joy of hearts aligned and spirits unbroken. The nightmare of being sole became a distant memory, replaced by the exhilarating reality of a life chosen freely, a love earned through courage, and the thrilling promise of endless possibilities, proving that even the darkest beginnings could give rise to the brightest new chapters.